Okay, so much for salt, right? I'm gonna add this into this video because it's important. If I could spend 24/7 fighting for justice for Shimei and Uncle John and Sierra and yada yada, I would, people. But we know that I'm up against something that's so horrible that I don't know. Okay, I'd have to be a millionaire, a billionaire, in order to pay for a whole group of lawyers to fight the corrupt government around this subject. Okay. Chicago hospitals body harvesting ring. Now, I watched this video earlier today. I'll provide the link in the description box, okay? So far they got 95K views. This was done 3 weeks ago. All right. So I listened to the video. It's not very long. And then I made a comment. Honestly, I wasn't too sure if YouTube was going to allow it to stay up. Because we know how shady YouTube can be when they want to do their censoring, right? But they did, and somebody responded. And then I came in and I answered the question and I gave a bit more information. But before I close the page and have half my comments disappear, I thought I'd read them because, you know, life would be better if my daughters were here, and they're not. And it's not like I haven't tried to fight for change, for the government to investigate criminal activity, you know, to bring awareness to the public, and to get justice for my family, including my dead daughters. But we know I'm dealing with the corrupt government that is replacing its workforce with robotoids, because I have that already documented with the picture of the coroner that was involved with Sierra, with her face, I'm not even going to say her, with its face under exposure through a editing program that I have that can do that. All right. So, but this person doesn't know this, right? They don't, you know, they asked, okay, so here, let me read this. All right. My daughter, Shimei Chorney, was murdered on April 11th of 2018, and her organs were illegally harvested within 7 hours of her body being should be taken to the hospital by paramedics. I already did the timeline, okay? So I know what I'm talking about. Of course, it took me months to figure out the timeline for this crime. But it's a racket where government workers oh boy, I'm getting tired. Andre, can you stay quiet, please? Where government workers obviously get huge kickbacks, including police, who not only cover up murder, but also facilitate illegal organ harvesting. Okay? Including other body parts, as they took my daughter's teeth as well. Right? Try taking it to court. You won't get far with it because the court system is just as corrupt as the healthcare system and police. No justice, no peace. Now, I wasn't too sure whether YouTube was going to let that comment stay up. But they did, and somebody replied, to whom I'm very grateful that they did that, because it shows me that my comment stayed up, at least that one. Did you do an autopsy? And then I came in and I answered, you ready? No. But even if I wanted to, it is illegal to have independent doctors or pathologists do autopsies. But I did determine via exposure editing tool of her picture while laying dead on a hospital bed for 9 days that she was embalmed and slowly decomposing. Okay? Through exposure, I isolated an orifice plug in the back of her throat, and I also realized that she had no teeth as they took them. It's all horrid. Should have 2 R's, but anyway. It's all horrid where I live, which is British Columbia, Canada. And my daughters were targeted, as I had 2 daughters die, with cops covering up either murder or foul play. And then I came in and I said, even when you try to take the government to court to either bring awareness to the problem or to expose crimes or to try and get justice, the court system and the government itself is corrupt to the core. Those individuals are all part of the problem as they conspire to cover up the truth and will call you frivolous and a waste of the court's time. Okay? You can see that? It's right there. Alright, and then I came in and I said something again. This is where YouTube will start taking down my comments. So before they take them all down, right, it takes effort to write these things. You have to think, right? You know what I'm saying? You want to portray yourself as clear as you can in a very small little space of words in terms of a paragraph. All right. And then I wrote, they use advanced medical tech, because in her mind she's like, well, how would you know this, right? Like, right? So I'm trying to explain to her why I've come to the conclusions that I've come to, right? All right. They use advanced medical technology to skew, distort reality, where they try to lead you to think one thing when it is the opposite. Meaning, whatever machine they had Shimei hooked up to wasn't a so-called respirator, but rather a device that controlled embalming solution that ran through a number of tubes that somehow connected to pads of sorts that were under her skin to control the color of her skin, as medical staff tried to say she was alive and they were trying to save her life. If you take a picture and take it to an editing software that can bring it to exposure, where you can begin to see the different layers of the object you're looking at, that is when certain colors are exposed to show more than what meets the naked eye. Okay? If you've been watching my videos, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I mean, could you imagine me talking about this every day, all day, on all my videos, rehashing the same proof? In other words, here's Shmei's face. Let's take it to exposure. Boom, bang, bing. Oh, look, isn't that amazing? There's the orifice plug. Oh, look, isn't that amazing? All those tubes have the same freaking color. Why is that? Those 2 over there don't, but the rest of them do. Why did they got 8 tubes running from the back, wherever, going obviously to her body, but when taken to exposure, the solution inside those 7 or 8 tubes are all the same color? Well, that's because they somehow put little pads underneath her skin so that whatever was running through those tubes was spreading out in the pads to give the illusion that her skin was receiving oxygen, when in fact it was not, because she was embalmed, right? But they had to make the skin look like it was alive, and that was the only way, and the proof is in the pudding with those tubes. Because what was running through those tubes was the same color that was running through her face. Right? As it was ready to fall off. Because they pulled her, they pulled down her face, and they ran their tubes under the skin, and they put back the fucking face. And that's why her face was falling off by day 9. Ready to fall off. Slip off. Well, slip off because the skin slips, right? They sutured up her jaw. I can show. The problem with YouTube, though, is they skew my videos. All right? They blur them. So even if I get a good video, I get it up, they turn around and they give me a codex where it blurs everything. Because they don't want you to see the truth. But I can, through exposure, prove that she had sutures on the corners of her lip because her jaw was dropping, because that's what happens when you're dead. Your jaw drops, so they have to suture it up at the corner of the mouth. Just little things like that, people. You know, on the 16th, her eyes were caving in. Okay? On the 19th, they had put eye caps in, and all of a sudden they were like this, as they were leaking. Her face was, you get blisters. As you're decomposing, your skin starts to blister. Right? Could you imagine me talking about that every day, showing the pictures like that every day, walking you through the same process every day, fighting for justice? How far would I get? Any further than what I've gotten now? Probably not. But every now and then I take a chance and I make these comments. Right? I give people the information that they need to know because it's a dangerous world out there. You can't trust what walks among us. When it works for the government, be very careful in regards to what you're interacting with, because you don't know what their plan is for you. Are all government workers like that? No, I don't think so. But there's quite a few of them that are definitely corrupt. And then I wrote again. Because I want this person to understand that I'm not just talking out of my ear here. I talk from experience. Okay? With AI advancement and robots replacing humans, that too is a slippery slope where body parts like teeth and skin become a commodity. Right? Because and the reason I say that is because if they're successful at taking Shimei's dead skin, okay? Because you have to remember, when they embalm the body, it's not so much the skin, quote unquote, that they're embalming, as they're embalming the muscles, just the body itself in general, right? And like, if they didn't take out the organs for harvesting, then they take out the organs more than likely and then put them in a bag and put them in the gut and then harvest the body. And really, the point of embalming a body is to slow down the decomposition. They can't stop it, but they can slow it down. But with my experience with an embalmed body in a ambient temperature where it's like, fairly warm, as if you were in a hospital room, and even then they kind of keep them chilly, but not enough compared to how they managed Sierra's body by putting her in cold storage in the morgue for 15 days or 19 days. She was in cold storage in the morgue for 19 days. And when I went and seen her body, her body didn't even look like it was really dead compared to Shimei's body, with it being embalmed, laying on a hospital bed for 9 days. So we got one body that's embalmed, laying in a hospital bed that is fairly warm, in a room that is fairly warm. They had to embalm her because if they wouldn't have embalmed her, by day 2, she would have started to smell. Okay, so they embalm bodies to slow down decomposition, to control the smell of the body as it's decomposing. We're in cold storage. By the time I got to see Sierra by day 19, she just smelled like old beef that had started to get a little fishy, but wasn't completely rotten yet, if that makes any sense. And the only sign of decomposition on her body as a whole without being embalmed. And yes, they took out her organs because she had a so-called autopsy because, it was an investigation, a fake one at that. But besides that point, if you're watching my videos, you know what I'm talking about. They needed an excuse to take out her organs, so they took out her organs. And, at the end of the day, though, people, like, the blisters that I told you about, she was getting a few of them on her face, but nothing on her body. Like, her body was pristine. Like, seriously, to be dead for 19 days, which makes me suspicious, you know what I'm saying? Because after 19 days, you think it would have been a little... But no, but I guess that's what cold storage does, so... But they couldn't put Shimei in the morgue in cold storage. They had to put her on a hospital bed. So that route, they took the embalming. But the point is, they had to fool us to make us think that she was alive, as they were obviously getting, some sort of payment to experiment on her body, or maybe it's standard practice for these people. I don't know, but she definitely had pads underneath her skin that were connected to those tubes, and there was like 7 of them. And they all had the same color in them, which was the same color, I'm pretty sure, that was on her face. And then as soon as they turned off the machine that they tried to say was a respirator, which it was not, within a minute and a bit, whatever was running through that machine changed the color through the tubes, and then that's how they changed the color of her face. So what I'm trying to say is, whatever they were doing with her skin was an ongoing situation with the fluid running through the pads and recirculating itself or something. That's how they controlled the color of her skin, but they couldn't stop the decomposition process. That's why they put the eye caps in. Yeah, because by day 16 her eyes were sinking in, unless of course maybe they're harvester eyes, who knows, but either or. Anyway, okay, let's get back to this. But could you imagine me talking about that every day, all day with these videos? I wish I could. I wish I could just keep swinging that bat, paving that way, right? Standing on the mountaintop, screaming at the top of my lungs, warning people about what's really going on in our hospitals, what's really going on with our kids, what's really going on in the world, and who's doing it, okay? Because it was the cops that are involved. It was the coroner's office that was involved. It's the hospital staff that's involved. It's the government that covers it up who's involved, okay? Right? They're all being employed by the government to one degree or another. So, how they get their kickbacks, each and every one of them as an individual, I don't know. But if you got coroners already, robots. If you've got robots already in a position of being coroners and being paid by the taxpayers to falsify death certificates, well, you have to ask yourself, who else is working as a government worker that is a robot? Because that's how sophisticated they're getting with their medical technology. And I think that's why honestly, she asked me autopsy. I couldn't. It's illegal to get an autopsy in British Columbia, Canada, because it would have been exposed. Right? If I had the money and I could have done it, I would have done it. But it's illegal, so even if I had the money, I couldn't do it. It's illegal to exhume people out here, too, to do an autopsy. Because they're covering it up. That's why, people. That's why they've made it illegal. Mm-hmm. But it's not illegal to take things to exposure and expose the truth. Right? Okay. With AI advancement and robots replacing humans, that too is a Andre, shut up. Oh boy. Is a slippery slope where body parts like teeth and skin become a commodity. As like I said, I have had 2 daughters die from being targeted, with my second daughter being lured to her death, where through exposure of a picture of the coroner who was at the scene, that thing, in my opinion, was a straight-up robotoid posing as a human. And with that comes again no justice. Right? Try taking that one to court. If they're not going to acknowledge what happened to Uncle John with legitimate bank statements and legitimate enduring powers of attorneys that was inside, that was in power of attorney, not one but 2, right? 2 separate types of power of attorney, you know, that was signed at the bank with being witnessed by bank employees and just the whole 9 yards. If they're not going to take and proving that there was bank fraud and mail fraud and conspiracy to do this and blah blah, kidnapping, they kidnapped John, you know, they were illegally detaining him, they were illegally drugging him, they were illegally holding him against his will, all to steal his money. And if you providing that evidence to the court and they can see it, because that's what I did when I submitted my lawsuit, and they ignored it, and then they came in with their funky shit trying to say, well, even if what you're showing me is true, he's dead now, and I'm saying no, he's not, and the judge is saying yes, and because in his mind John is dead, therefore it's all thrown out the window, and he threw it out of court, even though John was alive. But he threw it out of court on an assumption. It wasn't an assumption. It was just a tactic, people, to stall for time. Right? Because the last time I stood in front of a judge when it related to Uncle John, Mr. Bernard John Duncan, by myself in regards to dealing with his, right? I think that was Judge Savage. He threw it out, saying that John was dead, and therefore I had no right to represent him. And I'm like, no, I do. He's alive. Blah, 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 blah. I showed him the enduring power of attorney. I showed him the power of attorney. But because he wanted to throw it out, that was his only way. Right? And if you're not up on it, like ASAP, I suppose, as a professional lawyer would do, they win. And that's why they do it. So that judge covered up what happened to Uncle John. Well, it would be the same thing with this. Right? You know, you'd have to come in with I don't know what you'd come in with. Like, it's a hard fight. But people need to know. And that's what I don't like about YouTube. And I'm going to end it on this. I'm going to just convert this video over and call it a day because I'm kind of tired. You can hear it in my voice, people. Okay? Like, I've been pretty tired. So anyway, you know, I took the time to write it. Do I expect each and every comment to remain? Probably not. Let's count them. Okay, so there's the first comment. And then we have this person come in and ask a question. And then I did 1, 2, 3, 4, 4. So let's refresh the page and see what happens. Let's see if all 4 remain. Because that's why I'm doing this video. Because I'd be very surprised. Well, it says 4 comments. So let's see. Wait a minute. I did 4. That person did 1, which tells me they removed 1. Don't you think? Which one did they remove? So there's hers. That's 1. 1. Oh, look at this. This isn't, do you see now? You know why I do these videos. Then she came in, or this person came in, I don't know, woman, man, came in. That's crazy. Sorry for your loss. Okay. Where's my other 2 comments? Did you not just see that, people? So do you see how they're deceiving? 4 replies. I just read them. You just seen them. Okay, I'm not going to get on the bandwagon with YouTube, although I should put this video under YouTube Antics for sure in terms of my playlist, because this is the crap that we have to deal with, and this is why this shit gets thrown out of court, because this is the same kind of shenanigans that you would find in court. This is the same kind of shenanigans that you would find when you're dealing with corrupt policing agencies. This is the same kind of shenanigans that you would find at a hospital that does the things that I just talked about. All right? Which tells you that YouTube just fosters that type of criminal activity by hiding the truth, by censoring out the truth. What would be the purpose of them removing 3 of my comments? 2 of my comments? 2 of my comments. What would be the purpose of removing 2 of my comments? Outside of they're trying to hide something. Because they're sure in hell not protecting the public. Right? I can prove what I just said in terms of the orifice plug and all this other crap. Right? You know what I'm saying? So they moved the two middle ones, and they skewed it. This should be six replies, not 4. And that's why I did this, because that's what YouTube is about. It's a fake fucking website, okay? Basically, right? Yeah, real fake.